4 years will be resolved in the courts. It involves matters that date back many years, and in some cases many decades, and which in any event have nothing to do with the enormous problems that AIG has encountered in recent years under my successors. The question that was raised by Mr. Issa about so-called indictment was a threat by Eliot Spitzer when he was Attorney General, and he subsequently dropped that charge over a Thanksgiving weekend. AIG's history demonstrates that its business can be highly successful if properly managed and managed properly. AIG is the only way to ensure that the American taxpayer will be repaid. AIG is deeply diversified, has a deeply diversified earnings base. That was no accident. It was a conscious part of our approach to risk management when I and like-minded people managed AIG. We diversified in the insurance industry, both domestic and internationally, and within the insurance business, life and non-life. We were very creative in innovating new products, and then began finance operations to further diversify AIG's earnings base. That led to the creation of AIG-FP in 1987. We were then a AAA-rated company. From 1987 to 2004, my last full year at AIG contributed over $5 billion in AIG's pre-tax income, was subject to numerous risk controls by AIG senior management.
Could you pull the mic just a little closer? We're having trouble hearing you.
Sure. Is that better?
Thank you.
Let me just repeat. From 1987 to 2004, my last full year at AIG Financial Products contributed over $5 billion in AIG's pre-tax income, was subject to numerous risk controls by AIG senior management, and conducted its business largely on a hedged basis. Massive losses at AIG-FP in 2007 and 2008 resulted significantly from a shift in the way the unit did business after I left the company in the spring of 2004. Here's what happened. AIG continued to write credit default protection after the loss of its AAA rating. Not only did AIG continue doing so, but it massively increased the risk that it took on, reportedly writing more business in the 9 months after I left than in the previous 7 years. AIG changed the nature of the business from one focused initially on providing regulatory capital for foreign banks to one focused increasingly on subprime loans. AIG decided not to hedge its risk even after indexes that would have permitted such hedging were available, and even after AIG concluded internally that the business was too risky to continue to write new contracts, and after I left the management controls that I had in place to limit risk were reportedly weakened or eliminated. What are the problems with AIG bailout? I share your concern and the concern of the American people that the terms of the AIG bailout and its tremendous burden on taxpayers, all plans so far advanced by the U.S. government to date, have failed, and the current plan, in my opinion, will not succeed. Major mistakes have been made. The government imposed unrealistic financing terms on AIG in September of 2008, including approximately 14% interest in year one, charging interest whether AIG actually drew down funds or not. That was not only different from those that were imposed on any other company, but which fundamentally undermined AIG's continued viability. The government also obtained 79.9% of the equity in the company. They immediately announced that AIG would be liquidated, which inevitably caused employees, brokers, customers, and other business partners to flee, further undermining the company's continued viability. They began to liquidate the company at fire sale prices in the market, which obviously credit was difficult to obtain, and it was difficult to sell anything. They used AIG to funnel money to other institutions, including foreign banks. So AIG was required to put up collateral after losing their AAA rating. They advanced billions of dollars of taxpayer money to AIG instead of pursuing the opportunity to raise private capital in conjunction with providing government guarantees that would have eliminated the necessity of putting up additional cash collateral. There's a better approach. What should the government's policy be with regard to AIG? The primary objective should be to create conditions that allow AIG to repay the taxpayer, of course, and rebuilding AIG is the best way of doing that. Specifically, what should be done is to achieve this goal of AIG to pay back the taxpayer. 1. Wall off AIG financial products from the rest of the company and replace as many loans as possible with guarantees. Extend what remains of existing loans for 20 years at possible interest rates of 5%. That seems to be the TARP interest rate. Reduce the government's ownership to 15% common equity to allow private capital to be raised over time. At a later date, if necessary and proper conditions exist, non-core assets could be sold. The current approach of announcing the sale of insurance subsidiaries simply results in people seeking employment elsewhere and taking business with them. A new senior management team of internationalists with skilled insurance capabilities should be recruited. Insurance experience in the lines of business that AIG is engaged in. They must be quick learners to understand AIG's business and culture. You don't buy loyalty, but rather create it through strong but fair leadership. You must have the respect of your employees and the market. There should not be an on-the-job training experience. AIG's business model did not fail. Its management did. AIG's business model has a long track record of success over many decades. AIG can recover from its immediate crisis, continue to be an employer of tens of thousands of hard-working Americans, and repay the assistance that it's received from the American taxpayer, but only if both the government and AIG's management change their approach in dealing with its future. It seems to me that the role of government should be to get a company that's in need of help back on its feet as soon as possible so it can become a taxpayer again and an employer. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greenberg, for your statement. Let me begin by saying, who's responsible for the fall of AIG, and what did they specifically do or did not do that caused the failure? Who's responsible?
Well, clearly, the successor management has to be charged with that. Let me go back and explain the creation of AIG Financial Products for a moment, so you can put that in better focus. As I indicated, Senator Ribicoff, when he was alive, obviously, said I ought to meet a young man, which we did, and his name was Sosin. And he began AIG Financial Products. He was very bright and brought a very good team of PhD type of people with him. and did principally interest rate swaps. It was not a very complex business, but the AAA rating of AIG made it a very efficient business. As I said earlier, it produced from '87 till I left about $5 billion in profits. We had a disagreement with Sosin about a year and a half into the relationship, and we terminated, and he left, went elsewhere. And a man by the name of Tom Savage, a very bright PhD, became its manager, and business went along quite well. It really was an informal kind of joint venture. 70% of the profits were for AIG, and 30% went to AIG FP. But of the 30%, half of it had to remain in the company, in FP, in their capital account, subject to the same risk that AIG took. In other words, they had their own money in the company as part of the risk capital that we had. So that was another form of risk management on top of the risk management controls that we had. We were the first company, as far as I know, in the insurance industry to have an enterprise risk management department that covered all areas of AIG globally to ensure that we didn't have concentration in any single area of business. It was very effective. AIG Financial Products could not do a new product without having it climbed over by a number of different areas to ensure that it met our standards. It functioned quite well. As I said, when we left the company, there were three of us who left simultaneously. That was fairly important people: myself, the chief financial officer, and the head of investments. My successor obviously did not pay as much attention to what he should have paid attention to. I think the new chairman who succeeded me must have paid very little attention to it as well. And as a result, they went off on a tangent and wrote in 9 months more than double the amount of business that we had put on in financial products than we did in the past seven years, and of a lower quality business. All of that's been verified, and so clearly, if you don't have controls and you don't have management oversight, things could go wrong, and they did.
Right. Well, our purpose, Mr. Greenberg, is to try to get to the bottom of this. The American people are angry over what happened.
So am I.
Here. Yeah, and of course, we need to take a look to see in terms of what we need to do here in the Congress in terms of we look at the regulatory agencies, and we're trying to find out exactly what went wrong. Let me just ask this. It looks to me as though much of what went wrong at AIG was centered on the financial products unit, AIGFP. After you left, did AIGFP become a renegade operation?
Well, I wouldn't know if call it renegade. I think they got greedy. I think they wrote considerably more business than they should have. I think they should have hedged. When they lost the AAA rating after I left the company, that should have been a signal to discontinue writing credit default swaps and hedge the book, because by their own admission in their 10K filings, they said that they would be required to put up more collateral. So they knew that. They disclosed that. And having done that, you would have thought that somebody, whether the president, CEO,